The doctor said I had 48 hours left. I lay there, waiting for a final word of love from the man I had trusted for 7 years. Instead, he leaned down and whispered a secret that froze my blood. He thinks he has won, but his arrogance just gave me the weapon to destroy him. He believes I am dying, but I have never been more ready to fight. My name is Madeline Stone, though the business world knows me better as the iron-willed CEO of Stonehaven Developments. At 34 years old, I had built an empire that reshaped the Seattle skyline, yet here I was, reduced to a trembling figure in the VIP suite of Pacific Mercy Hospital. The room smelled of antiseptic and expensive lilies, a scent that cloyed at the back of my throat and made me want to gag. Dr. Evans stood at the foot of my bed, his face a mask of professional pity, but his words were the hammer blows that shattered my reality. "I am so sorry, Mrs. Stone," Dr. Evans said, his voice low and grave. "The acute liver failure is progressing faster than we anticipated. The toxins are overwhelming your system. Despite our best efforts with the dialysis and the experimental treatments, nothing is working. I am afraid we are looking at a timeline of 48 to 72 hours. Silence suffocated the room. I looked past the doctor to the two people who were supposed to be my anchors in this storm. Richard, my husband of 7 years, stood by the window with his face buried in his hands. My mother-in-law, Victoria, sat in the plush armchair, dabbing at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. To an outsider, they were the picture of devastation, but I saw the subtle stiffening of Richard's shoulders, not from grief, but from tension waiting to be released. I saw Victoria check her diamond watch, a gesture so quick it was almost imperceptible. Their eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth that should have been there for a dying wife and daughter-in-law. It was as if they were waiting for a timer to run out. Dr. Evans nodded solemnly and exited the room to give us privacy. The heavy door clicked shut, sealing my fate. Richard immediately moved toward the bed. He looked every inch the grieving spouse. His handsome face crumpled in performed anguish. He took my hand, his grip warm and firm, the same hand that had sworn to protect me at the altar. "Oh, Maddie," he choked out, leaning over the bed rails so his face hovered just above mine. "I can't believe this is happening. I can't lose you." I wanted to squeeze his hand back. I wanted to tell him I was scared. I waited for him to tell me he loved me, to promise he would stay by my side until the very end. He lowered his head until his lips were brushing against my ear, his breath hot against my cold skin. It was the intimacy of a lover, or so I thought. He was close enough that Victoria could not hear him from her chair. Then came the whisper, "Finally." "It is finally done," he breathed, the sorrow in his voice vanishing instantly, replaced by a chilling, venomous clarity. 2 days from now, the entire Stonehaven empire and the trust fund will belong to me. The words did not make sense at first. They floated in the haze of my medication, alien and impossible. But then the meaning slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. The shock was absolute. My body went rigid, paralyzed not by the failing organ inside me, but by the monster beside me. Richard pulled back and stood up straight. For a fleeting second, before he recomposed his mask of tragedy, I saw it. A smirk, a tiny, satisfied curl of his lip that screamed victory. He turned to his mother. "Mother, we should start making arrangements." She wouldn't want a mess. Victoria nodded, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur that they assumed I was too far gone to comprehend. "I will call the estate attorney, Richard. We need to ensure the transfer forms are ready the moment the death certificate is signed. We cannot have the board freezing the accounts." "Make sure the liquidity is prioritized," Richard replied, his voice devoid of the tremor he had feigned just moments ago. "I have debts to settle before the funeral. Debts, transfer forms, liquidity. They were stripping my carcass before I was even cold. A primal rage ignited deep within my gut, burning hotter than the fever ravaging my body. I wanted to scream. I wanted to claw out Richard's eyes, but I knew I was weak. If I reacted now, they would know I was lucid. They would know I knew. I let my eyelids flutter shut. I slackened my jaw and forced my breathing to become shallow and rhythmic. I played the part they assigned to me. I played the dying victim, but in the darkness behind my closed eyes, the tears stopped. I was not going to die like this. I was Madeline Stone, and if I had 48 hours left, I would spend every single second of them making sure Richard regretted the day he met me. The heavy door clicked shut, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. Through the fog of my fading consciousness, I heard the click of Richard's dress shoes and the tapping of Victoria's heels receding down the hallway. They were heading to meet the lawyer, confident that the husk of a woman left in the bed was too weak to hear, let alone act. They thought I was already a corpse, just waiting for the official stamp. I lay there in the dim light, the hum of the medical machinery the only sound keeping me tethered to the present. But my mind was traveling back, ripping through the veil of the last 7 years. I remembered the day I met Richard. He was a visionary architect then, or so he claimed, with big dreams but empty pockets. I was the one who saw the potential in his sketches. I was the one who funded his firm, Stonehaven's first subsidiary. I remembered the way he used to look at me, with eyes that I thought held adoration, but now I recognized as the hungry gaze of a predator looking at a meal. I had paid for everything: the penthouse, the custom Italian suits he wore to charm investors, the luxury cars he insisted were necessary for his image. I remembered the frantic late-night calls about business investments gone wrong, which I now realized were nothing more than cover-ups for his gambling debts. I had poured millions into a black hole, thinking I was building a future with my partner. I was not a partner. I was a bank vault with a pulse. And then there was Victoria. She had moved into our guest wing 2 years ago, playing the role of the saintly, supportive mother-in-law to perfection. I closed my eyes and could almost smell the pungent, earthy aroma of the special herbal tea she insisted on brewing for me every single morning. "It is an old family recipe. Madeline," she would say, her voice dripping with fake honey. "It will help with your stress levels. Drink up, dear." The realization hit me with the force of a seizure. My health had not started deteriorating at random. The chronic fatigue, the nausea, the yellowing of my skin. It all began exactly 2 years ago, right around at the time I took my first sip of that tea. It was not a tragedy. It was a timeline. They had been murdering me by inches, day by day, cup by cup, waiting for my liver to finally surrender so they could inherit the empire I built from the ground up. A fresh wave of agony rolled through my abdomen, sharp and relentless, like a hot knife twisting in my gut. I gasped, tears leaking from the corners of my eyes. But beneath the pain, something else was waking up. It was a cold, hard knot of fury. I refused to die like this. I refused to be the tragic, foolish wife who died so her husband could buy a yacht with her life insurance. Summoning every ounce of adrenaline left in my failing body, I moved my hand. It felt heavy, like it was made of lead, but I forced it to slide under the pillow. My fingers brushed against the cool metal of my smartphone. I gripped it, my knuckles turning white, and pulled it out. My vision blurred, swimming in and out of focus, but muscle memory guided my thumb. I did not call the police. Not yet. I called the one person who had never lied to me. Clara, my chief operating officer, the woman who knew where every skeleton in Stonehaven was buried. The phone rang once, twice. Maddie Clara's voice was sharp, instantly alert. "I thought you were resting. Is everything okay?" I took a breath, the air rattling in my fluid-filled lungs. When I spoke, My voice was a broken whisper, but the steel behind it was unmistakable. Clara. Listen to me carefully, I rasped, clutching the phone like a lifeline. Do not ask questions. Just do exactly as I say. I need you at Pacific Mercy Hospital. Right now. I'm on my way, she said, the professional mask slipping just enough to reveal her fear. Use the service entrance. The one for deliveries. I ordered, fighting the darkness encroaching on my vision. And Clara. Bring the confidential files, the ones we keep in the safe, regarding the offshore accounts and the original deed to the house. Bring everything. Maddie. What is going on, Richard? He is trying to kill me, I whispered, the truth tasting like acid on my tongue. And if you don't get here in 20 minutes, he might actually succeed. 15 minutes later, the service door to my room creaked open. A figure slipped inside, clad in an oversized gray hoodie and a baseball cap pulled low over their eyes. It was a far cry from the tailored power suits Clara usually wore in the boardroom, but her sharp, intelligent eyes were unmistakable. She locked the door behind her and rushed to my bedside, dropping a heavy black duffel bag on the floor. Maddie, she breathed, pulling down her hood to reveal a face etched with worry. I came as fast as I could. The security guard at the loading dock owed me a favor. No one saw me. I reached out, my hand trembling violently, and gripped her wrist. Clara. You have to listen. I don't have much time. Richard. He isn't grieving. He is waiting. I spilled everything. I told her about the whisper, the cold calculation in his voice, the 2-year timeline of the tea, and the agonizing realization that my liver failure was not a disease, but a slow-motion murder. As I spoke, Clara's face went pale, then hardened into a mask of cold fury. She opened her bag and pulled out a laptop and a small case of electronic equipment. I knew it, Clara hissed, her voice low and dangerous. I knew something was wrong. Maddie. I have been tracking some irregularities in the construction accounts for the last 6 months. Small amounts at first. But lately, huge sums have been disappearing into shell companies. I couldn't prove it was him because he used your digital signature override. I thought maybe you were moving assets for tax reasons. But if he is doing this, he is cashing out. I finished for her, struggling to keep my voice steady. He plans to take everything. Clara, we have to stop him. Not just fire him. I want to bury him. I took a ragged breath and gave her the instructions I had formulated in the darkness. You need to contact Harrison. Do not call the family firm. Call Harrison directly on his burner line. Tell him I need him here with a toxicologist and a notary immediately. Tell him it is a matter of life and death. Clara nodded, typing furiously on her phone. Done. What else the house? I said, urgency lending me a temporary strength. Richard thinks he has sanitized everything, but he doesn't know about the wall safe in my dressing room, the one behind the painting of the coastline. The code is 0924. Inside, you will find the original deeds to the estate and the prenuptial agreement he thinks I destroyed. Get them. Clara stopped typing and looked at me, her eyes wide. I'm breaking into your house. Yes, I said. And while you are there, I need you to plant these. I pointed to the small recording devices in her kit. Put them in the living room and in Victoria's bedroom. They will be feeling confident tonight. They will talk. I need to hear exactly how they planned to kill me. Consider it done, Clara said, zipping up her bag. She squeezed my hand one last time. I will be back before the sun goes down. Just hang on. Maddie, please. She slipped out the way she came, vanishing like a ghost. I was alone again, left to the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. I began to count the minutes in my head, visualizing Clara driving across the city, visualizing Harrison mobilizing his team. Every second was a battle against the exhaustion trying to drag me under. 30 minutes passed. Then, the main door to my room swung open. Richard walked in. He had removed his tie and unbuttoned his collar, looking the part of the exhausted, devoted husband returning to his dying wife's side. But in his arms, he carried a massive bouquet of white lilies. The scent hit me instantly, heavy and suffocating. My throat tightened. Richard knew I had a mild allergy to lilies. For years, I had banned them from our house because they made my eyes itch and my throat scratchy. Bringing them here, into a room where I was already struggling to breathe, was not a mistake. It was a taunt. "I brought you some flowers, darling," Richard said, his voice dripping with faux sweetness as he placed the vase directly on the bedside table, inches from my face. "To brighten up the room. Mother says they symbolize the restoration of the soul." I looked at the flowers, then at him. He was smiling, a small, cruel quirk of the lips that didn't reach his eyes. He wanted me to suffer. He wanted to see if I had the strength to complain. "Thank you." I managed to wheeze, turning my head away from the pollen-laden blooms. "They are beautiful. I'm glad you like them," he said, sitting down and crossing his legs comfortably. "Rest now, Maddie. You don't have much time left, and we want you to be comfortable." I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to cough, and visualized the prison cell that would soon be his home. Richard sat in the uncomfortable vinyl chair next to my bed, a small paring knife in his hand. He was peeling an apple with surgical precision, the skin coming away in one long, unbroken red ribbon. The rhythmic rasp of the blade against the fruit was the only sound in the room until he began to speak about my funeral. "I was thinking of the cathedral downtown." "Maddie," he said, slicing a piece of apple and offering it to me, though he knew I could not eat. "We will have the reception at the Four Seasons. It needs to be grand, a true celebration of everything you achieved. I have already spoken to the florist about white roses, thousands of them. It will be breathtaking." I looked at him, feeling a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with my failing liver. He was planning a gala, not a memorial. He was planning the launch party for his new life as a wealthy widower. The company. I wheezed, forcing my voice to sound thin and reedy. "Is the board? Are they panicking?" "The stock." Richard smiled, a patronizing expression that made my skin crawl. "Shh, darling. Do not worry your pretty little head about business. The board is fully supportive. Stocks are stable. Everything is under control." Liar. I knew for a fact that the rumors of my illness had caused a 7% drop in share value just this morning. Clara had told me. But Richard needed me calm. He needed me compliant. Just then, the door opened and Victoria bustled in. She carried a stainless steel thermal flask in her hands. Holding it like a holy relic, she unscrewed the cap, and steam curled into the air, carrying a heavy, medicinal scent that masked something metallic. "I made this for you." "Madeline," she crooned, pouring the dark liquid into a small cup. "It is a concentrated ginseng infusion, very rare. It will help with your stress levels. It will make the transition peaceful." She held the cup out to me. The steam hit my face. My instincts screamed at me to slap it away. This was it, the final dose. The amount of arsenic needed to finish off a liver that was already shutting down would be minimal. They were trying to speed up the timeline. I stared at the black liquid, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had to be smart. I had to be sure. "I feel sick," I whispered, turning my face away feebly. "The smell, it makes me want to vomit." "It is good for you," Richard insisted, leaning forward, the knife still in his hand. "Just drink it, Maddie. For me." "Is it too hot?" I asked, my voice trembling. My throat is so sore. "Richard, please taste it for me. Just a sip, to check the temperature." The room went dead silent. Richard froze. Victoria's smile faltered, her eyes darting to her son with sudden, sharp alarm. It was a simple request. A loving husband would not hesitate to sip a bit of herbal tea for his dying wife. Richard pulled back, clearing his throat loudly. Well, I just had a double espresso. Maddie, I don't want to ruin the taste of your special tea. Mother made it just for you. Yes, Victoria added quickly, her voice rising an octave. It is very potent. Richard shouldn't have it. It is strictly for your condition. Their refusal was better than a lab report. They knew. They knew exactly what was in that cup. Okay, I sighed, feigning defeat. Leave it. On the table. I will drink it. In a minute. I just need to catch my breath. Victoria hesitated, but placed the cup on the bedside table. Don't wait too long. Dear, it works best when it is warm. They turned away for a moment to whisper by the window. I moved with the speed of a desperate woman. I grabbed the cup, my hand shaking, and tipped a small amount onto the handkerchief I had hidden in my palm. I shoved the damp cloth back under the sheets and set the cup back down, just as Richard turned around. Before he could check if I had drunk any, his phone buzzed violently in his pocket. He pulled it out, and I saw the color drain from his face. It was not a social call. I have to take this, he snapped, his facade of the grieving husband cracking to reveal the desperate gambler beneath. It is the insurance adjuster. He hurried out of the room, but I heard him hiss into the phone as the door closed. I told you, tomorrow I will have the money in 48 hours. Stop calling me. He was running out of time, but so was I. And now, I had the weapon I needed soaked into a piece of cotton under my leg. The vibration of my phone against my hip was the only lifeline I had left. I pulled it out with shaking hands. It was a text from Clara I am in. Bugs are live. Sending you the audio stream now. I shoved my earbuds in, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. The audio file loaded, and suddenly, the silence of my hospital room was replaced by the crisp, high-definition sounds of my own living room. I heard the clink of glass against a coaster and the familiar, heavy sigh of my mother-in-law. She is just so stubborn. Victoria's voice came through, distorted slightly by distance, but unmistakably vicious. The dosage was perfect. Richard. The arsenic should have shut her kidneys down 2 days ago. Why is she still lingering? It is inconvenient. Arsenic. The word hung in the air, heavy and absolute. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. They had not just poisoned me, they had been chemically assassinating me while smiling and pouring my morning tea. I don't care about the timeline anymore. Mother. Richard's voice snapped back, sounding frayed and desperate. I need access to the accounts tonight. The bookies are not going to wait for her liver to fail. I already leveraged the house. If I don't pay the $700,000 I lost on those damn football parlays and that crypto crash by Friday, they are going to break my legs. I gasped, nearly dropping the phone. He had mortgaged our home, my sanctuary. The house I had bought with the first major bonus from Stonehaven was now collateral for his gambling addiction. Calm down, Victoria soothed, the ice returning to her tone. We don't need her to die to get the company. We just need her power of attorney. You have been practicing her signature, haven't you? We will draft the transfer documents tonight. We will say she signed them in a moment of lucidity. Who is going to question a grieving husband? You are right, Richard muttered. I will forge it. Once the control is transferred, well, maybe we can just put a pillow over her face and be done with it. A notification popped up on my screen, interrupting the stream of horror. It was a photo from Clara. It showed a small, unlabeled glass vial filled with white powder, nestled deep inside the velvet lining of Victoria's antique jewelry box. The caption read, "Got it. Leaving now." 10 minutes later, the door to my room opened, but it wasn't a nurse. It was Harrison, My personal attorney. A man with eyes like flint and a suit that cost more than Richard's car. He was followed closely by a woman carrying a heavy metal case, Dr. Liu, a private toxicologist I had kept on retainer for corporate espionage matters, never thinking I would need her for my own murder investigation. They bypassed the nurses' station completely, moving with the authority of people who owned the building. Maddie, Harrison said, locking the door behind him. Clara briefed me. We are going off the record. The hospital does not know we are here. They are using arsenic, I rasped, sitting up with a strength I didn't know I possessed. I have them on tape admitting it, and they are planning to forge my signature tonight to steal the company. I reached under the sheets and pulled out the handkerchief, now stained with the drying brown liquid of the ginseng tea. Test this, I commanded, handing it to Dr. Liu. That is the latest dose. Victoria tried to feed it to me an hour ago. Dr. Liu nodded, immediately opening her case to start a rapid field test. Meanwhile, Harrison whipped out a tablet, his fingers flying across the screen. We are drafting a new will. Madeline, Harrison said, his voice hard and professional. Effective immediately. We are revoking all prior powers of attorney. We are freezing the joint accounts. And most importantly, we are disinheriting Richard entirely. Do it, I said, my voice cold. If I die. I want every single penny, every stock option, every brick of Stonehaven to go to the Seattle Victim Support Charity. Richard gets nothing. Not a dime. Not even the house he mortgaged. Harrison looked at me, a grim smile touching his lips. Consider it done. Now, sign here. I took the stylus, my hand steady for the first time in weeks. I wasn't signing a will. I was signing a declaration of war. Dr. Liu looked up from her portable spectrometer, her expression grim as she held the test strip under the harsh hospital light. It is confirmed, she said, her voice leaving no room for doubt. We are looking at significant traces of arsenic, laced with a high-grade sedative. The combination is designed to mimic organ failure while keeping the victim pliable. If you had drunk that cup, Mrs. Stone, you would not have woken up. Harrison did not waste a second. He dialed a number on his secure line, his eyes locking with mine. Get me Chief O'Malley. He barked into the phone. James, it is Harrison. I am at Pacific Mercy with Maddie Stone. We have an attempted homicide in progress. I need a team here now, and I need them quiet. No sirens. We are setting a trap. Within minutes, the room transformed from a place of mourning into a tactical command center. The plan was simple but dangerous. I had to continue playing the victim. I had to let them believe they were winning until the very moment they incriminated themselves. We need you lucid. Maddie, Dr. Liu said, preparing a syringe filled with a clear liquid. But you have to look like you are fading. This is a chelating agent mixed with a strong stimulant. It will counteract the sedatives and start binding the heavy metals in your blood. You are going to feel a rush of adrenaline, but you must not move. Can you do that? I can do anything to see them rot, I whispered, gritting my teeth as the needle pierced my arm. The effect was almost instantaneous. The fog that had clouded my brain for weeks lifted, replaced by a razor-sharp clarity. My heart pounded, but I forced my muscles to remain limp. I was a coil of pure energy hidden inside a broken shell. By 6 o'clock in the evening, the stage was set. Chief O'Malley had deployed plainclothes officers disguised as orderlies and janitorial staff in the hallway. A female detective, dressed in scrubs, busied herself checking the vitals monitor near the window. Clara returned, looking breathless, clutching a thick blue folder. I have the bait, Clara said, placing the folder on the nightstand. These are the fake transfer documents. They look exactly like the real ones. If Richard tries to get you to sign these, he is committing fraud on top of everything else. He will, I said, closing my eyes as I heard footsteps approaching the door. He is too greedy to wait. Richard and Victoria entered the room just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, sinister shadows across the floor. They looked fresh, energized, and disturbingly cheerful for people whose family member was supposedly hours away from death. Richard had even changed into a crisp new shirt. "How is she?" Richard asked the undercover detective, his voice feigning concern while his eyes immediately darted to the blue folder on the nightstand. "She is declining rapidly," the detective replied, her voice professional and detached. "Her vitals are very weak. It could be any moment now." I lay perfectly still, my breathing shallow and ragged. We had adjusted the heart monitor to emit a slow, erratic beep that echoed through the tense silence of the room. Beep. Pause. Beep. It was the soundtrack of their victory, or so they thought. Richard approached the bed, looming over me. I could feel his gaze burning into my eyelids. He picked up the blue folder, the papers rustling softly. "Mother, look," he whispered, barely containing his excitement. "The transfer papers are already here. Harrison must have sent them over." "Good," Victoria hissed back. "Wake her up. We need that signature before the doctor comes back for rounds." The air in the room grew heavy, charged with a suffocating tension. I kept my eyes closed, counting the seconds in my head, feeling Richard's impatience radiating off him like heat. "Come on, Maddie," he muttered, his hand gripping my shoulder a little too hard. "Don't die on me yet, not until you make me rich." Richard turned to the nurse, who was actually Detective Miller in scrubs, and flashed a tight, strained smile. "Excuse me, nurse," he said, his voice dropping to a tone of confidential gravity. "My mother and I need a moment alone with my wife. We need to say our final goodbyes and pray over her. It is a family tradition. Could you give us 10 minutes? Detective Miller nodded, checking the fake chart in her hands. "Of course, Mr. Stone. I will be right outside if the alarms go off." The heavy door clicked shut, and the atmosphere in the room instantly shifted. The performance of grief evaporated, replaced by a frantic, predatory energy. Richard did not waste a second on prayer. He reached into the blue folder and pulled out the stack of documents, smoothing them out on the tray table before shoving it over my lap. "Maddie," he said, shaking my shoulder with unnecessary force. "Maddie, wake up. I need you to focus." I let out a low groan, fluttering my eyelids as if the effort of waking cost me everything. "Richard, what? What is it?" "It is a consent form, darling," he lied smoothly, uncapping a heavy fountain pen and pressing it into my limp hand. "For a new procedure, a pain management block. It will make everything stop hurting. You just need to sign here so the doctors can help you." I looked at the paper through half-closed eyes. It was not a medical form. It was an irrevocable power of attorney and a transfer of deed for the Stonehaven headquarters. The audacity of it made my blood boil, fueled by the stimulants coursing through my veins. But I forced my hand to tremble violently. I can't see," I whispered, allowing the pen to hover aimlessly over the paper. "It is blurry. Just sign on the line." "Madeline," Victoria snapped from the foot of the bed. She was not looking at my face. Her eyes were locked on the document with a hunger that was almost obscene. "Stop stalling and sign it! We want you to be at peace." I let the pen drift down, making a jagged scratch on the paper that was nowhere near the signature line. Richard hissed in frustration, grabbing my wrist to steady it. His grip was bruising, his patience completely gone. "Right here, Maddie," he urged, his breath hot on my face. "Come on, do it for me. Sign it, honey. Then you can sleep forever." The cruelty of those words nearly made me break character. Sleep forever. He was literally telling me to sign my own death warrant so he could move on. I decided to give the hidden cameras one last, undeniable piece of evidence. As Richard guided my hand toward the line, I deliberately went limp. My fingers opened, and the heavy pen clattered onto the linoleum floor, rolling under the bed. Oh, no. I moaned softly. I dropped it. I am so clumsy. Richard stood up, his face contorted with rage. He kicked the bed frame, the vibration jarring my body. Damn it. He roared, forgetting to whisper. He dropped to his knees, scrambling on the floor to retrieve the pen. When he stood back up, the mask was gone. His face was red, his eyes bulging with a mix of exhaustion and fury. He jammed the pen back into my hand, squeezing my fingers around it so hard I felt a knuckle pop. Pick up the damn pen and sign the paper. Madeline, he snarled, his voice dripping with venom. I am sick of this. I am sick of waiting. Richard, you are hurting me, I whimpered, playing the terrified victim to perfection. Why are you yelling? Because I have been waiting for this day for 2 years. You stupid woman, he screamed, leaning in so close that spittle landed on my cheek. 2 years of playing the loving husband, 2 years of dealing with your pathetic neediness. Just sign the paper and die already so I can get my life back. There it was, the confession, loud and clear for the judge, the jury, and the world to hear. The room was deadly silent for a heartbeat. Victoria looked nervous, glancing at the door, but Richard was too far gone in his adrenaline and greed to care. He tapped the signature line aggressively. Sign. Now. I took a deep breath. The trembling in my hand stopped instantly. I gripped the pen with the firmness of the CEO who had crushed competitors and built skyscrapers. I looked down at the paper. I did not sign Madeline Stone. Instead, in bold, jagged capital letters that carved into the paper, I wrote 3 words. I finished the last letter and let the pen rest on the page. I know everything. Richard snatched the paper, his eyes scanning the bottom of the page for the scrawl that would make him a millionaire. The triumphant grin on his face froze instantly. It was like watching a wax figure melt under a blowtorch. He blinked, reading the line again, his brain seemingly unable to process the 3 bold words that had replaced his victory. Slowly, he looked up. He found no dying, confused woman in the bed. He found me. My eyes were wide open, clear, and burning with a hatred so cold it could have frozen hell over. I locked eyes with him and did not blink. What? What is this? He stammered, the paper shaking in his grip like a leaf in a gale. I did not answer with a whisper. I sat bolt upright, the movement sudden and violent. With one swift motion, I ripped the tape holding the fake saline drip to my arm and flung the tube aside. It clattered against the metal stand, the sound ringing like a bell in the shocked silence. 2 days is more than enough time to send you to prison. Richard, I declared, my voice strong and commanding, echoing off the sterile walls. Victoria let out a strangled scream, her composure shattering instantly. She lunged toward the bed, her claw-like hands reaching for the incriminating paper. You little witch, give that to me, but she never reached me. The bathroom door slammed open and Clara stepped out, blocking Victoria's path with the solidity of a bodyguard. She folded her arms, a dark, satisfied smirk on her face. I would not do that if I were you. Victoria, Clara said, her voice dripping with disdain. Richard looked from me to Clara, trapped and confused. I reached under my pillow and pulled out the small digital recorder. I pressed the play button and tossed it onto the mattress between us. Richard's own voice filled the room, loud and distorted but undeniable. Once the control is transferred, well, maybe we can just put a pillow over her face and be done with it. The color drained from Richard's face, leaving him ghostly pale. He looked at the device, then at me, and I saw the exact moment the panic turned into a feral desperation. He realized there was no talking his way out of this. There was no charm left to use. "You bitch," he roared. He lunged at me, his hands reaching for my throat, his eyes wide with murderous intent. He was going to finish the job right there. Police, get down, get on the ground, now. The door to the hallway burst open with a crash that shook the frame. The nurses and orderlies who had been patrolling the hall flooded into the room, weapons drawn. Chief O'Malley led the charge. Before Richard's fingers could even graze my neck, 2 officers tackled him. They slammed him onto the bed, pinning his face against the mattress where he had planned to smother me. "Get off me! She is lying! She is crazy!" Richard screamed, thrashing wildly, but the officers wrenched his arms behind his back. The metallic click-click of handcuffs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Across the room, Victoria was frantically digging into her designer handbag, trying to hide the vial of white powder. Detective Miller, the woman who had played the nurse earlier, was on her in a second. She grabbed Victoria's wrist and twisted it professionally. The bag fell, spilling its contents, including the small, unlabeled glass vial which rolled across the floor to stop at Harrison's feet. "Victoria Stone, you are under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy," Detective Miller announced, spinning my mother-in-law around and cuffing her. The room was a whirlwind of shouting voices and physical struggle, but I sat perfectly still in the eye of the storm. I watched as they hauled Richard off the bed. His hair was disheveled, his shirt torn, and his face was a mask of sheer terror and impotent rage. He looked at me one last time as they dragged him toward the door, and for the first time in 7 years, I saw him for what he truly was. He was small, he was pathetic, and he was finished. I sat on the edge of the bed, my legs dangling but steady, watching the final act of this grotesque play unfold. With a calm hand, I picked up the plastic biohazard bag containing the stained handkerchief and the stack of fraudulent financial documents Clara had retrieved. I handed them to Chief O'Malley, who accepted them with a solemn nod. "Here is the chain of evidence. James," I said, my voice devoid of the tremor that had plagued me for months. "The toxicology report confirms arsenic and sedatives. The recording proves intent, and these papers prove the motive. They wanted my money, and they were willing to stop my heart to get it." Chief O'Malley passed the evidence to a uniformed officer and turned to face my husband and mother-in-law. His voice boomed through the small room, authoritative and final. "Richard Stone, Victoria Stone, you are both under arrest for attempted murder in the 1st degree, conspiracy to commit homicide, wire fraud, and abuse of a vulnerable adult. You have the right to remain silent." The reality of the situation finally pierced through Richard's panic. As the officers hauled him toward the door, his resistance crumbled into pathetic sobbing. He looked back at me, his face streaked with tears and snot, stripping away any last vestige of the charming man I thought I had married. Maddie, please," he wailed, struggling against the cuffs. "It wasn't me, it was her. It was all Mother's idea. She made me do it. I didn't want to hurt you. She said it was the only way to pay the debts. Please, baby, don't let them take me." I watched him with cold detachment. He was throwing his own mother to the wolves to save his skin. It was pathetic. Victoria, however, did not beg. She stood tall even as the cuffs bit into her wrists, her eyes burning with a manic, hateful light. She spat on the floor near my feet. "You always were a weak, clinging little thing," she hissed, her voice vibrating with venom. "You should have just died quietly. You don't deserve that company. You don't deserve any of it." "I should have used a higher dose the first week." The officers shoved her forward, cutting off her tirade. As Richard passed me, I stood up and took one step toward him. He stopped struggling, hope flickering in his eyes. Thinking perhaps I had found a shred of mercy, I leaned in, my voice low and hard as granite. "You wanted my fortune." "Richard," I asked. "Well, do not worry. I am going to spend it. I will use every single dime to hire the most vicious prosecutors on the West Coast to ensure you rot in a cell for the rest of your miserable life. Enjoy prison." His face collapsed. The officers dragged them out, their protests fading down the hallway until the heavy silence of the hospital returned. Dr. Evans rushed back into the room a moment later, looking flustered but relieved. He checked the monitors and reviewed the rapid test results Dr. Liu had provided. "Mrs. Stone," he said, letting out a long breath. This changes everything. Since the liver failure was induced by acute arsenic toxicity and not a degenerative disease, the damage is reversible. We caught it just in time. We will start aggressive dialysis and chelation therapy immediately. It will be a hard road, but you are going to make a full recovery." The weight of his words hit me harder than the betrayal. I was going to live. I turned to Clara. Her professional demeanor finally cracked, and she rushed forward. We embraced tightly, burying our faces in each other's shoulders. I felt her shaking, and I realized I was weeping too, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of survival. "We got them, Maddie," she whispered into my hair. "We actually got them." "We did," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. By the next morning, the story had broken. The headlines were sensational. "Real estate tycoon survives poison plot by husband," instead of tanking. "Stonehaven's stock price soared by 15%. The public loved a survivor." They loved a fighter. I was no longer just a CEO, I was a symbol of resilience. From my hospital bed, I made one final call to my real estate agent. "Sell the house," I ordered, staring out at the Seattle skyline. "I don't care about the market value. Sell it today. Burn the furniture, strip the walls. I never want to step foot in that place again. I want every trace of Richard Stone erased from the face of the earth." I hung up the phone. The chapter was closed. Now, it was time to rebuild. 7 days. That was how long it had been since the chaos in the hospital room. But it felt like a lifetime had passed. I walked into the police station wearing a sharp black trench coat that concealed the weight I had lost. I was still pale, and my steps were measured to hide the lingering fatigue in my muscles. But the way I held my head was different. I was no longer the victim lying in a hospital bed waiting for the end. I was the executioner coming to inspect her work. Detective Miller led me to the observation room. The air smelled of stale coffee and floor wax. I stood before the large one-way mirror and looked into the interrogation room. Richard sat there, slumped over a metal table. He looked unrecognizable. The arrogant, well-groomed man who had smirked at my bedside was gone. In his place was a hollow shell, unshaven and twitching, his eyes darting around the gray room in a state of perpetual panic. He looked small. "He has been crying for his mother for 3 days, Detective Miller said quietly, standing beside me with her arms crossed. "But she is in a cell down the hall, blaming him for everything." I did not feel pity. I felt nothing but a cold, hard satisfaction. I turned to the public defender who was waiting for me in the corner of the room, holding a briefcase that looked too big for him. I pulled a thick stack of documents from my bag. It was the unilateral divorce filing and a permanent restraining order, drafted by Harrison and ruthless in its terms. "Give these to him," I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. "Mrs. Stone, perhaps we should discuss the asset division," the lawyer began. I did not let him finish. I threw the heavy packet of papers onto the table in front of him. They landed with a loud slap that made him flinch. "There is nothing to discuss." I cut in, my tone sharp as a razor. "He gets nothing. Tell him if he contests a single line. I will release the full audio recordings of him plotting my murder to every news outlet in the country. Get him to sign it." I walked out before he could respond. On the steps of the precinct, surrounded by a swarm of reporters, I made my announcement. I spoke into the microphones, my voice projecting strength I had forged in the fire of betrayal. I announced the creation of the 48 Hours Fund, a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing legal and financial aid to victims of domestic abuse and financial fraud. I was taking the timeline of my intended death and turning it into a lifeline for others. An hour later, I stepped out of the elevator and into the lobby of Stonehaven Developments. For a moment, silence reigned. Then, a single clap started, followed by another, until the entire floor erupted in thunderous applause. My employees, the people I had built this company with, were standing at their desks, cheering. I walked through the sea of familiar faces, not with tears, but with a proud smile. I called a meeting in the main conference room. I stood at the head of the table and motioned for Clara to stand up. Effective immediately, I announced, looking at the woman who had saved my life. Clara is promoted to vice president and full partner of Stonehaven. She is the only person in this room who knew the ship was sinking and chose to grab a bucket instead of a life vest. Clara looked at me, her eyes shining, and we shared a nod of profound understanding. We were safe. We were in control. As the sun began to set, I found myself standing alone in my office on the top floor. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked down at the city of Seattle. A light rain was falling, blurring the lights of the traffic far below into streaks of gold and red. It was a beautiful, melancholic sight. I pressed my hand against the cool glass. I thought back to Dr. Evans standing at the foot of my bed, his face grim as he gave me that impossible deadline. 2 days, 48 hours. You only have 2 days left. I whispered to my reflection in the glass, mimicking the fear I had felt then. But then, a smile touched my lips. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a survivor who had walked through hell and come out holding the devil's trident. They said I was dying, I thought, the realization settling into my bones like iron. But the truth is, that was the moment I finally started living. I turned my back on the window, leaving the rain and the past behind me. I walked toward the door of the boardroom, my heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. I was ready to start a new era, one where I was stronger, sharper, and absolutely untouchable. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and let's share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this journey of justice, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to me.